Hello and welcome back to the digital stage. It's been a hot minute since we've been here, so I'm actually really excited to be here and talking to everybody. Today, Warren and I are here to talk about purpose-driven marketing with the true powerhouse in the field, Shonali Burke. And Shonali is an award-winning strategist who helps organizations dream big and actually achieve those dreams, which is not something everyone can say. I love it. As the former Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer for Washington, D.C.'s Arena Stage, she engineered a phenomenal post-pandemic revenue rebound, taking earned revenue from zero to a staggering $7 million, and even took a show to Broadway in the process, which I can't wait to hear about. Shonali is a firm believer in measuring what matters, focusing on outcomes, not just vanity metrics, my favorite term that I have to say again and again and again to our clients when they're like, why don't we have more followers? She teaches at Johns Hopkins University and is currently writing her first book called The Non-Obvious Guide to Public Relations and Communication, which I, for one, cannot wait to see what comes out. So thanks for joining us, Shonali.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Andy and Warren. Thank you so much for having me.
I have so many questions for you, but the first I want to hear about this book. Tell me about the premise of this book.
Oh, thank you. I love that we're starting off with the book. So my publisher, Robin Hargav, who I was my birthday twin, by the way, which I think is cool to have a publisher who's your birthday twin, has a long and storied career himself in PR and marketing, and then branched out into publishing some years ago, and started imprint called the Non-Obvious series, which I thought was so smart because it's kind of the the other kind that makes you think you're stupid. So it's like the blank stupid person's guide to whatever. And the tagline of these books is that they're like having coffee with an expert. So, and there's a whole plethora of them, and they're really, really fun. They're fun to read, they're easy to read, and they're full of actionable information. So when we were talking about potentially a book for me to write, given that I kind of grew out of PR before I moved into broader marketing, we were talking about how everybody thinks they can do public relations because most people in the business world can string a sentence together. And therefore they think they can write a press release and get media to an event and do the things that make the public engaged, while having actually a very narrow opinion of what it truly is. Because when we think about public relations, we are really talking about the classical definition of building and maintaining mutually beneficial relationships with your publics, aka your audiences. And that's so much more than just media relations. So we were talking about that, and I thought, well, that's something I could write about, because my entire career has been not just about media relations, certainly in the earlier part, but then as I got more involved in social media and social tech, really starting to experiment on how to leverage social technologies, to build these relationships so that we don't just grow our advocates offline, but online as well. And then how do we connect them? How do we connect our various audiences to the mission of an organization so that together we are working towards the same goal, which should be both beneficial for the public as well as the organization? So that's a very long way of saying what it's about.
Yeah, but it's so important. And so the word connection, I think, is really important to me. And when we talk about marketing, and I, own a marketing agency, when I talk about marketing to my clients, they think it's all about pushing and sharing and distributing. And that word connection is so lost in the idea that it's actually a conversation you're trying to start. It's a relationship that you're trying to build. So I'm curious, with your expertise in social and building those connections on social media, how do you encourage it to be more of a two-way connection versus just, followers and, pushing out information?
I think part of it is to really help an organization understand that a conversation is not and should not be something to be scared of. I think a lot of where organizations get stuck, even today, is that if they engage, and I'm going to use air quotes a lot because, what does that mean? Yeah. If they engage or if they invite you to a conversation, they're going to hear things that they don't like. Well, I have a news flash for you. People are saying things you don't like all the time. You are just not listening, or you are choosing not to listen. Yeah. And that's one of the things that social technologies gave us. they gave us the ability to listen to what more than just our friends and family and chosen stakeholders are saying. They gave us the ability to really trap in, if not to the zeitgeist, then at least to the public at large and opinions and perceptions in general that you could then really think about, say, is that really how I'm perceived? What do I need to do to change that? And the beauty of using social tech is that you don't have to depend only on traditional media or legacy media to do it. Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
And I think legacy media is very important, by the way. So I think it starts with that, really trying to help them understand that there are conversations taking place all the time. And true power is in harnessing the information and the passion of the people engaged in those conversations and kind of taking a deep breath and going, what are they saying about us? 9 times out of 10, it's not as bad as we think it's going to be. And I think that's the other thing that, why don't we just start dipping our toes into some listening and some engagement and see how people react? Because if you tend to do things on a smaller scale, then it's usually easier. You get used to it. It's like learning to swim, right? You start off in the shallow end and you start, you learn how to tread water and so on. And I can speak to this because I'm learning to swim right now. So
For real?
yes.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah.
Oh, neat. So I think that's a huge thing to be able to do, to be able to get an organization to say, yeah, maybe there are these conversations happening. So we're just going to kind of buck up and listen to them and then see what happens. And I think once you do that, you are 9 times out of 10, again, going to find people who want to help you succeed. And those are the kinds of people who become your advocates, your supporters, your ambassadors, all of the things that are now all over the place in quote unquote influence marketing that really has been done for decades. It just wasn't called that. And that really helps you together achieve that goal of moving your mission forward with that public trust.
So I guess my question to you, Shonali, is, there must be some leaders or some people that have been on teams that you've been, collaborating with who just deep in their heart just either didn't get social media or, just were scared of it or didn't want to listen to those voices that were, that might be negative. So I guess how have you gone about navigating and swimming through those conversations?
That's such a great question, Warren. A lot of times I've seen that if you start off with one, you could do like an environmental scan and you could also look at similar organizations who are doing the things, in social. And you do a little bit of research and you are likely to find some results that they have talked about. Whether it is growing audiences, whether it's been able to translate into revenue or organizational KPIs. And those are great use cases to bring to leadership to say, look, this is an organization with a similar mission, similar kind of space that they're working in. This is what they've been able to do. How about we try something like this? So I think you can look for similarities with organizations and also revenue, your size, because there's not much point in going to a small nonprofit and pulling up a great example of one that's 50 times that size, because then your leader's going to say, we just don't have the resources to do that. And I think then the other part is talking about how technology allows us to try things in a very nimble, in a very agile way. So we don't need to put a ton of resources, financial resources between starting to try certain things in social. So for example, when we started doing influencer marketing or influencer outreach, I should say, at Arena Stage, one of the first things I suggested, because there was no such program, was rather than investing into advertising with influencers and so on, inviting them to opening nights. That itself was a departure, but that was something that already existed. So we could simply leverage an existing event and allocate some tickets for influencers, creators, and do that a few times and then show the content results that it's having. That's really helping to boost the organization's overall content online. And then little by little, you start to see you can make progress.
I love that. I'm curious how you tie together, with your background in measurement and analytics. I think one of the hardest things to sell to the board, and we work with a lot of boards, that when you can't see direct ROI on brand marketing, on social media, how do you tie those efforts into, because reach is one thing, but we talk about vanity metrics. A lot of times reach or followers, likes, and engagement can be vanity metrics. And unless they convert into real revenue, it's really hard. And so I'm curious what sorts of KPIs or what you're looking at to sort of build when you build a program, how that all works together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great question. I always, always, always start at the end. Always, and maybe it's just one thing, right? Okay, we know that our revenue goal is blank. That's a hard goal. There's no ifs,
Yeah.
ands, or buts about that.
Mm.
There's
Yep.
no, well, we want to get 5 million impressions, or what does that mean? So whatever we do, we are working backwards from that goal, and everything we do has to ladder back up to that goal, or whatever the 2, 3, 4 organizational goals and KPIs are. What I started to do relatively early in my career, because I was so interested in connecting outputs, the work that we're doing, to the actual outcomes, was start to look at correlations. And this was a lot of the work that I did that was informed by my work in the agency world. But then when I worked at the ASPCA and I was actually building and running the department, where I had, I don't want to say the luxury, but the freedom of putting in place a system or a program that we could actually try and do consistent tracking and say, okay, what are we tracking to? If we are tracking audience growth, online donations, what are the specific things we are tracking, and where do we need to see the needle move to? So what I found very important, and this is something that I've reinforced to my students that I did at Arena and wherever I go next, is it's not important to track 50 things, but what are the 2, 3, 4 things we're going to track? And then create a system where you are doing that consistently. So at the ASPCA, we had some early wins that gave us budget, so we could put in place a pretty sophisticated tracking system. We were looking at messages, we were looking at specific organizations, we were looking at specific spokespeople, but we were constantly also tracking to web analytics, to online donations, to lifetime revenue as well. That was a major, major KPI for the organization. And what were the correlations? So that was a very sophisticated system. On the flip side, when I worked with USA for Unix on the refugee awareness campaign, the Blue Key campaign several years ago, they didn't have a big budget. It was, however, an early use case in building online influencers and online advocates. So by that time, I had become a devotee of tracking URLs and really creating, and Warren, you will love this because, as you know, if you're doing something online, you can track everything. So if we identify certain places our audience needs to get to, whether that's a sales page, a goal completion, a specific page in your campaign, and you create those tracking URLs, and then you create specific versions for every group that you're working with, whether it's online stakeholders, the media, organic media, paid media, etc. Then you start to really see what that picture looks like. And that's what we did very successfully, and I'm very proud of at Arena, that we built up that system so that over time, whether it was a show campaign, whether we were experimenting with a brand campaign, we had tracking URLs up the wazoo. And we did very, very deep and detailed marketing and analytic reports that also tied to the sales staff. So we could see when we were using or pushing out a certain promotion or a certain URL, where it was landing most effectively, which mechanisms of the outputs were contributing to that. And over again, it was email. And so then email became really the driver of how are we making sure that we are leveraging email enough so that the different audiences we're talking to feel compelled to take those actions. And so in that regard, even if social wasn't necessarily a driver of revenue or the highest driver of revenue, oftentimes it's in that top of the funnel space where people are using it to get to something, or that's where the conversation is being driven. Or then when you're collecting data, even anecdotally or through service, well, I heard about it on social, or somebody comes to you to say, I saw this on blank social platform. How do we do this?
I love that at the end of the day, it always ends up back to email. For
I
all the
was gonna
tools,
say,
it's for all the tools we use and all the different things that we can do. At the end of the day, somebody has something binging at them in their inbox, they're going to click on it and open it.
Yep, absolutely.
it's unbelievable to me how many clients we have that just think our one e-newsletter every month is fine. That's all we need to send. Good enough. Oh my gosh, no. Like email is by far the highest converting channel we have across all of our client accounts as well. It's incredible. So
It is, and again, I think that's kind of, the it's like the bad rap that PR has because everyone
Yeah.
thinks they can do it. Email has the same
yes,
perception, I think, because everybody has email.
Yep.
And everyone is so tired of constantly being spammed. And this is where I think email service providers, especially in the early days, did not do a good job of educating their customers, because I've lost count of how many times my email address is just added to
Yep.
some list. And I'm very picky about permissions. And you've got canned spam and everything. But
Yeah.
half the time people aren't paying attention
nobody
to it.
cares. Yep.
Mhm.
It'll come. Canada's got some better lockdowns. California's got better lockdowns. Europe has very good lockdowns, but the US just we don't value data privacy and data security in the same way that most of the world does. It's going to take some massive breach or some sort of nefarious use case, I think, before we actually get some good definitions around
I'm
it.
so sad to agree with you.
Mhm. I know.
And what's even sadder is that those breaches are happening every day.
Every day. Yeah, I know. Everyone's social security number was just breached a couple weeks, last week it was. Yeah. So,
Well, last week is when we heard about it.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Yep.
true.
And here we are, still doing the same thing. So some of the stuff I think that you just said is so interesting to me, because we work with a lot of orgs that are smaller in size. And so they've got really small marketing teams. And so to me, building a really sophisticated marketing attribution tool feels really daunting. But I love the idea, because building separate UTMs for all of their landing pages is really quite easy. With a subscription to Bitly, you can create as many as you like. And so being able to track, what you're publishing across different platforms by using a different web address is just such a simple and easy way to see what's bringing ROI.
And yes, absolutely. And I would also go further than Bitly, and I have nothing against Bitly.
Yeah,
I love Bitly, have my own, branded Bitly, because it's
Yeah.
just cool. I would highly encourage just using Google's native tool,
UTMs, yep.
the UTM builder, and then using your own shortener, because I'm not, and perhaps you already know this, Andy, I'm not sure that Bitly tracks everything if it's not built in Bitly. So I think if you
Agreed.
have the actual UTM code, and then, it's folded into Bitly or,
That's what I would do.
Bitly
Yep.
or whatever else, because everybody likes their own shortener. You've
Yep.
got your basic code in there that, most of the time people are not stripping out. I think you would only be a marketing geek if you're actually stripping it off.
That's
you
me.
know,
I do. I always strip out the UTM before I paste something to share in our
Which
Slack
is a
channel or
funny
anything else. Yeah.
thing. I'm like,
I know.
Good.
It's true. I know that. I don't ever think about that as being a marketing nerd thing, but it absolutely is. So yeah, here we are.
I'll admit to doing something also, which is actually when I go to an ad, if there's a page on Google that I'm given a paid ad and an organic ad, and I'm upset at the brand, I will click on the paid ad to make sure that they have to spend some money.
Let me
I've
just tell
never
you.
actually done that, but I might start doing revenge clicking.
Well, you know what that is? It's bad media buying. Like, nobody should be paying for their brand terminology if they're already ranking for those things. So that's just somebody not paying attention to their pay-per-click campaigns. Like, it's got to
That's
exclude those
really
campaigns.
smart. That's such a smart thing to say, Andy. And Seth Godin, I don't know if you're not a fan, then I'm
a fan.
huge
Yeah.
Seth Godin fan. And I don't know if you got his calendar that he has like a page a day kind of thing like this. And just in the last few days, there was one about, it might have been his email now. Seth, if Seth watches this, which he won't, he'll probably be like, oh, this is why is she mangling all the things that I do? I think it maybe was in it's one of them. But he talked about the difference between sponsored results and organic results, and how you really have to work much harder to get those organic results. And there's, and really kind of putting the focus on the community building and putting in the effort to build those. I do think that people don't really care at the end of the day. Most
Nope.
people will click on a sponsored link. They're not going to go, well, they paid for that, so that's why it's up there. Most people will just click on it. But like you say, if you work at getting those organic results up, then that's a better, more efficient use of the marketing dollars that you do have.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually heard the inverse as well, that people are starting to trust paid results more because of the fact that you're paying for them. It must mean that the content that you're serving is relevant to the search terms. So no one's going to waste their money promoting an ad that if somebody clicks on it, they're going to say, no, this is not what I was looking for, right? There's, the ad content match is so important that they know that they're going to get, highly convert on those ads. So.
Unless someone is very nefarious.
Yep.
And
which they are all the time. Yep.
All the time.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Competitive bidding is a thing. So that's for sure. All right. Let's go back to the topic. I have some questions because we do work with a lot of museums and cultural institutions as well. And one of the hardest things that I have when I'm working with them on sort of messaging strategy and comm strategy is getting them to embrace their larger purpose when they are doing their communications, when they're doing their messaging. And I know you talk a lot about purpose-driven marketing, but a lot of our organizations are simply selling tickets, getting people to sign up for membership because it's all about the benefits, it's like a very transactional approach to the marketing that they're doing. And I think they're really missing the boat in positioning their collections, their institutions into the broader picture. And so I want to understand sort of how you think cultural institutions can more effectively sort of communicate their mission and their values through their digital marketing or digital communications in a general sense.
If you haven't already read her materials, I think going to Colleen Dillon Schneider's website and Know Your Own Bone blog is absolutely brilliant. Warren is nodding because we both saw Colleen speak at a conference last year, and it's just mind-blowing. And the data that she reports on is fascinating, and it would be very pertinent to your clients because consistently the data shows that organizations, including exhibit-based organizations like museums and art venues, who are communicating around their mission, are retaining and growing audiences. Everybody post-pandemic is struggling with negative substitution. And that is, hopefully I'm quoting Colleen correctly on this, but that's the phenomenon of for every historic visitor who's aging out of the visitor demographic, is there at least one visitor aging in? But it's not. And I forget the exact ratios, but it's less than one. So ideally, you want to have more than one. So you will have 1.2 to 1 or 1. Whatever. But if you have like 0.92 to 1 or 0.95 or 0.96 or whatever that is, that means for 100,000 people who are leaving, you're only bringing in 92,000 or 95,000 or whatever that is. So even if your marketing and everything is on point, you're still losing audience. And that's just going to keep happening. And then you've also got significantly changed behaviors that are contributing to this, where people just have different cultural consumption patterns now. So every time an organization shows its value to the community, how its mission is helping to serve the community, the changing demographics of the community, and how it is an asset to the local, regional, national area that it serves, that becomes a point of differentiation for someone making the decision of whether to go to Museum A or Museum B.
It's interesting. I got the opportunity to visit Arena Stage a few months ago. Thank you, Shonali, for that. And I wonder how that position plays with Arena Stage, or did play with Arena Stage, because while there were what I would call, grayer-haired people in the audience, there was a lot of young faces there, and it felt like the investment in the organization was in the broader community and not just to traditional audiences.
Yeah. Remind me which show you saw, Warren?
I'm drawing a blank on the name right now, but
it was just
Pardon?
It was just this past summer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, was it maybe Exclusion? Well, it doesn't matter, whichever the show was. I'm glad that you noticed that. And part of that, I think, was the cumulative effect of everything that we've been doing. So consistently starting to bring in influencers, again, air quotes, but people who create content, several of whom over months and, a year plus started to engage with the organization in different ways. So they may have come in initially as creators for their platform, but then they're a photographer in their own right or a videographer. So then they started creating different kinds of content. And I think every time people are vesting of themselves in an organization, they have a vested interest in telling people about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why you bring them in, but that's what happens. So we see that time and time again. So it's things like that. It's things like really building up our media presence to be larger than just the shows. So you could have, I'm not going to say a formulaic way, but certainly when I learned at my first PR job in country, which was back in San Francisco, and it was primarily theater, PR, and marketing, the agency I worked for had a great system of pre-show publicity, show publicity running up to opening week, and then kind of maintaining the stories. And so we were constantly coming up with exciting and interesting stories to pitch to the media. So certainly institutionalizing that approach at Arena, but also making sure we were talking about the brand. We were talking about the importance of Arena to the economic and cultural history of the District of Columbia, of the Southwest, of how it was so pivotal in the redevelopment of the Wharf area, how it's been a driver in nonprofit theater movement in the country. So really making sure that there were 3 or 4 key messaging pillars, as it were, that I worked a lot to develop, working with leadership and my colleagues as well, to make sure that we created very strong messaging pillars, that we had proof points that we could pull on when we were either pitching stories or executives were talking with the media. And if you show someone, I think I am yet to come across a legitimate journalist or media professional who, when you are saying, there's a bigger picture here, there's a bigger story here, that they won't at least listen to you. And oftentimes that will weave its way into the story as well. Now, we have no control over that, but what we do have control over is, are we sharing that information? Are we talking about how this particular show is so mission aligned and why, and examples of how that effort has played a part in the overall growth of the theater and of the area. I hope that helped explain it.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. I have one last question because it has been a delight talking to you. I could probably talk to you for another hour and a half, so I want to make sure that you and I get a chance to connect afterwards. But one thing I like to ask everybody is, if you had a piece of advice to give a young marketer coming into a performing arts arena or into arts marketing in a general sense, is there any advice you might give to somebody coming into this space?
Yes, I would get very friendly and very cozy with data and with analytics and lose your fear of it immediately, because the world is already driven by data and analytics. And those of us who work in arts and culture, in entertainment, it's very tempting to think that the art will drive everything. And unfortunately, it won't, because at the end of the day, we live in a world that is driven by data, and data is driving revenue and profit. And make no mistake, nonprofit organizations have to learn how to bring that money in to keep the lights on so that they can fulfill their missions. So they cannot operate at a loss forever. Ultimately, you're going to have to find a way to break even and to start exceeding your expenses, because that does not allow you. Otherwise, you can't invest. You can't invest in the growth of the organization, in the professional development of your staff, contribute to society. And, it's contributed revenue. The donor dollars are to come by, and they're getting fewer and fewer. So you have to be able to explain to people why your organization, why what you do is so important, and how it helps make their life better, and how by them helping you, they are helping to really support an ecosystem that gives back to our society and to our culture. And to do that, you have to be able to at least understand and look for the stories in data. And to me, that's what's so exciting about data. It's not just, it's a bunch of ones and zeros if you're not looking for the stories. But if you look for the stories and then tell those stories in a compelling way, that's how you build those relationships and grow them for sustained growth.
I love that.
That's great.
So where can people find you if they want to connect with you after this episode?
Thank you so much for asking. ShonaliBurke.com. So my first name, last name, com. My blog is not updated, so please don't hold that against me. There's just a lot going on right now. And also, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. It's just Shonali Burke is my name. If people want to hit me up on LinkedIn, I would really appreciate a note saying who they are and why they're connecting, because I do get inundated with a lot of connection requests, and sometimes I can't respond to them all. But either through that or through my website, they'll find a way to email me. And if I can help anybody, I absolutely will. But if I can't, I'll say so, and I hope that will be taken respectfully as I can.
And tell us a little bit about the book. When can we expect to see the book?
That's the $1 million question.
Yep.
When I finish it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we'll go follow you on LinkedIn.
I'm supposed to be finishing it, but I'm also working on, finding my next great job. So that's kind of going to take priority.
I know how that goes. Good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon. It has just been a delight talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.